Secure people are dangerous. I am secure. One of the best lines from one of the best movies I have seen all year. So today we are discussing May December, currently streaming on Netflix. So briefly, May December follows Elizabeth, a B-list actress who becomes obsessed with the subject of her next movie. This movie is loosely based on the true story of Mary Kay Letourneau, a teacher who had an affair with her 12-year-old student. Directed by Todd Haynes, the film stars Julianne Moore, Natalie Portman, and Charles Melton in a phenomenal performance about a man trying to come to terms with this trauma that he has suffered. And this movie almost feels like an anti-erotic thriller. Like, you have this music that's very prevalent, it just feels like something you would see in the 80s and 90s about people having these passionate, inappropriate affairs with one another. Except in this case, there's no passion, there's no chemistry. Gracie and Joe have been married for 20 years. They live in this beautiful house, they have this beautiful life, but behind this facade is a total nightmare. Starting with Natalie Portman's character, like, they could have easily called this movie A Tale of Two Narcissists. Like, she is something else. So she almost plays like a caricature of an actress, and the physical performances in this movie, from Julianne Moore's lisp to just Charles Melton's mannerisms, were unbelievable. Natalie Portman plays a B-list actress, basically someone who stars in Lifetime movies, an individual that is not really in any danger of starring on Broadway or winning an Academy Award. She's basically like a method actor in all the worst ways possible. So basically, method acting encourages the actor to try and walk in their subject's shoes, but in her case, she takes it way too far, right? There's just no empathy for her. And one of the reasons that she's able to mirror Julianne Moore so well is because she's equally devoid of emotions, right? From what little we know of her, she is engaged to be married, but she's having this affair with this director. And she just strikes me as someone willing to do anything and anything to get what she wants. And so she literally arrives on Gracie's doorstep as a piece of shit. So she knocks on the door and she finds this box, and she doesn't know what's in the box, and she hands it to Gracie, and inside the box is shit. And I thought that was really telling, because on one hand, Elizabeth is something else, but on the other hand, like, Gracie makes a comment like, oh, it's been a while since people have left shit at my door, and the vibe I get is that everyone has forgotten what a piece of shit Gracie is. Like, Gracie is a terrible human being. Like, I honestly couldn't believe these two. So Elizabeth enters their life at a very pivotal time period. Gracie and Joe have 2 children, and they're about to be graduating high school. And whereas Gracie should be retiring, poor Joe is just like, what am I going to do with the rest of my life, right? And so Elizabeth is here to do some research about this Lifetime movie that she's about to make, but she's a little too late, right? Like, she is so narcissistic. Like, she thinks that making this movie is going to get her views. And so she claims that she took the part because it's interesting and complex, but that's not really the reason, right? So she's coming in here and she basically just watches her, tries to get as much information as possible out of her. And the way that she watches Gracie, it's as if she's watching like a movie, right? The way she goes around interviewing people, like, she's trying to get as much tea as possible. And in terms of this town, like, the setting was almost perfect, because again, it's this picturesque place, and as well integrated as they seem in this community, again, nothing is what it looks like. And so Elizabeth is making this very outdated movie, and one of the reasons this community is okay with Gracie and Joe is because they've already had these conversations, right? Like, somebody's already made a movie about this. The tabloids have come and gone, like, public interest in the story has disappeared. And although no one in this community is comfortable with Gracie and her relationship to Joe, they've kind of found a way to tolerate it, right? They kind of speak openly about it. They're like, yeah, like, we don't really like this. We were shocked. But, like, there's really nothing that we can do. And you get the sense that one of the reasons this community tries to be hospitable and tries to make them feel like, they're okay is because they have these 2 children, and also maybe because they feel like Joe is a victim. Like, they do really feel like they're between a rock and a hard place. Elizabeth comes in, she wants to do some research, But again, she doesn't really care about the subject of her film. Like, she's just there for herself. And I felt that her character was an excellent commentary in terms of how we exploit victims of these true crimes for our entertainment. Like, at one point in time, she actually sleeps with Joe. And again, she does it just to advance her art, right? To advance her career. She doesn't care about him any more than Gracie does. And again, sometimes I think we become so desensitized to these types of stories, and we forget that there's real casualties involved and there's real people involved. And I felt the way that Natalie Portman played Elizabeth really showed that, this kind of callous nature, right? This kind of like, well, I just want to know as much dirt as possible so I can make this movie as, you know, clickbaity as possible so I can, you know, become more famous, right? She doesn't really care about creating something that's going to give anyone any insight into anything. And I feel that's very much true when it comes to the state of true crime. So her behavior, like the way she played her, there's a lot of commentary that could be made. And so Gracie is basically, they are two sides of the same coin. So Gracie is also a bit of an actress, and she tries her best to convince Elizabeth that their love is real. But the more evidence that she presents, the creepier that she looks, right? At one point, she presents her this love letter that she claims proves, like, look, we are in love. And it's just some childish, like, you know, pieces when I'm with you. I was like, ma'am, like, you are a total creep. And you could tell, like, Elizabeth just doesn't like her. And the more time she spends with her, the less that she likes her. So Gracie, played by Julianne Moore, again, that lisp, like, it is, she plays her so well because it adds to this naivete, right? Like, she really comes off as a woman that doesn't have an angry bone in her body. But it's clear that she has several manipulative bones in her body. So Joe and Gracie met when Gracie hired Joe when he was, I guess, in the 6th or 7th grade to work for her. Their affair came to light when they were caught in the stockroom. And I thought that the store manager, like the way he described Gracie, was spot on as this kind of virus that infiltrates and just takes over, right? Initially, he hired her for some help. Next thing you know, she was taking care of the books. Like, she was doing everything. She was like, she's very gifted at getting people to do exactly what she wants, especially Joe. I thought her children were really fascinating to watch because she has children from a previous marriage, and then she has her children with Joe. And the contrast between these kids is really interesting because she has this son that seems equally as manipulative as like mother, like son, right? He kind of divulges this information to Elizabeth that he thinks will be super helpful and thinks will get him a job. Like, and she has this daughter that seems super chill. And again, you get the sense that no one is okay with this, but they kind of learn to cope with it in some way. And as far as the children that she has with Joe, like, she has twins. Their children feel more mature than they do, right? Like, there's one fascinating scene between Joe and his son, and it really felt like, that's the thing, like, he feels like more of a brother than an actual father figure. So when I'm looking at these two twins and this couple, like, it just feels like everyone is playing house until this house burns to the ground. Charles Melton as Joe gives a phenomenal performance. The contrast between him and Gracie is quite stark. So Gracie is a hunter, right? She's a predator. And she basically is just devoid of empathy. Like, the only person she cares about is herself. And there are several hints throughout the movie that really allude to that. But for me, it's the way that she kind of constantly pits herself against Joe. So one of the ways she tries to convince Elizabeth, besides these creepy, like, cards of love and declarations of love, is how naive and innocent she was, right? She grew up with 4 brothers. She was very sheltered. Like, she claimed she came from just this innocent background, right? She'd only been with one man, and she'd married him because he looked really good on paper. And as she is sort of speaking about herself, it's basically like she's trying to put herself on the same level as Joe. And this is a very classic predatory move, right? To convince the victim that they are more mature than they really are. So she the way she talks about Joe is quite disturbing, right? Like, he wasn't like other children. He was taking care of his family. You know, he was more assertive. He was more confident. He had been with other women prior to her. Other women. Like that scene when Elizabeth was like, when he was in the 7th grade, like kids lie. Like he could have said anything. What makes her a predator is the way that she's able to play with his boundaries. Like as an adult, she knows her boundaries. She also knows what a child's boundaries are, right? So when you're that age, when you're in the 7th grade, you're basically exploring your boundaries, right? You don't know where they begin and you don't know where they end. But as an adult, you're very much aware of where they should begin and where they should end. And so she sets these boundaries for Joe, right? He never really got a chance to explore that. And it shows in his personality, right? He doesn't feel like a father. He feels like an emotionally stunted man. And his mannerisms, the way he moves in the world, like it's very much like a teenager. Like everything about him, the way that he is intimate with Elizabeth, the way he talks to his kids, and the way he speaks to Gracie specifically. Like Gracie has all the control, right? She's the person that makes the decisions in the house, and it's almost like he's afraid of her. Like he's very careful to appease her, and there's really no attraction between these two individuals, right? Like they kind of coexist in the same space, and he does whatever she tells him to do just to make sure that she doesn't get angry with him, right? To keep her calm. Like he's just kind of like in this role of constantly being her crutch, and he doesn't really know what else is meant for him. And anytime he tries to break away, she keeps control of him. And this sort of tactic of convincing the victim that they're much older than they are, it works both ways. On one hand, she's presenting herself to be super innocent, but on the other hand, she's basically telling him that he's more mature, that you know he should be sure of his decisions, but he has no autonomy. Like one of the things that Gracie does well is make it seem like this man is independent, but he's far from independent, right? This man is paralyzed by a situation, and he's literally locked in this house. Like he has nowhere else to go. He goes to work, he comes home. He goes to work, he goes home. I didn't see him hang out with any friends. Like it doesn't appear like he has a social life outside of Gracie, so she very much controls everything about him. When he was confronting her, like again, she took back control by convincing him like, you're not just a kid. You seduced me. And again, it's a tactic to make the person feel more mature and more able than in reality that they are. And I thought Charles Melton's performance was phenomenal because he's this, you know, very confident, you know, good looking, strong man. Like that's the thing, he's physically strong, and yet he cowers in front of her, right? He's like a boy, you know, not wanting to be yelled at by his parents. Like he has the mind of a child, and he's never been able to really, you know, I hate to say it, become a butterfly. Like a common theme in this movie is, you know, the butterfly. Like he takes care of these monarch butterflies because I guess they're going extinct. And I thought that was very telling because he never got a chance, right? He's been stuck in this cage and there's really no way out. He's going through a midlife crisis. So in between Elizabeth's presence and his children graduating, there's kind of a window of opportunity here, right? To be like, maybe I can be something else. Maybe I can explore. I can draw outside the lines. And that's why Gracie hates Elizabeth so much, because she's kind of stirring up all these emotions that she thought she had done a very good job of just like suppressing and just burying. And so she doesn't really know how to take back control, and whether or not she actually does, the movie leaves that open to you. But for me, like Gracie is something else. Like the way that she portrayed herself, the way that she discusses Joe and their relationship, right? Like this is like the power discrepancy is crazy. You have one person that's super powerful and the other person that just has this illusion of power, right? He's super weak. And she's kind of kept him in that state. Like that's the crazy part. He's never really matured emotionally. And I feel like that says a lot about their dynamic, right? Like, okay, it's one thing to be physically a 7th grader. It's another thing to have grown up to mentally be a 7th grader. And the fact that she's been able to keep him in that space and keep control of him is really telling. And again, Gracie is something else, right? She has complete control over everyone in this house. And she's not willing to let that control go. And I thought their dynamic was really fantastic in showing how grooming works and how predators move, right? A predator can be a female, it can be a man. But again, a key component of that is convincing their victim that they are more able than they really are. And so the movie ends, and it's really up to you to decide whether or not Joe makes it out. Like, I thought that final scene of him crying, you know, you got a sense of either relief, you know, he's very proud of his children. That's kind of what keeps him grounded. That's what maybe keeps him in this relationship. But now that they're graduating, like, I couldn't tell if those were tears of freedom or tears of just depression, like where he was just like, am I going to be stuck in this forever? Like, it was really hard to tell, and it was really a testament to his performance. Like, he did a fantastic job. In terms of Elizabeth's raggedy behind, like, she goes back to method acting, and I guess she got everything that she needed. And so this movie overall, I feel, is excellent. I think it's incredibly well written, and it's also like reading between the lines. Like, every scene is just packed with commentary. Like, it doesn't beat you over the head with it, but like, he weaves in this commentary so well. And again, like Charles Melton, I felt his performance grounded it in reality. And again, he's living this nightmare. Like, this is not a story. Like, he's still trying to come to terms with what happened to him. And it seems like with all these reporters, with all these movies made, like, no one has been able to get to the truth of anything. Like, right? Like, everybody's just interested in using his story for entertainment. But at the end, he's stuck, right? He's stuck in this limbo. And again, I think it really speaks to how with true crime and stories like this, we kind of forget that there's people involved. Like once we find out about the story, that's pretty much where our interest begins and ends. But we never think about what happens to these people afterwards, how their life is affected. And this guy has been living in limbo for the past 24 years. So he's living this adult life, but yet he's not an adult, right? He doesn't know what adults do. And that just broke my heart. So you guys, and I think one of the reasons, like, the tone of the movie might make people uncomfortable is for that reason. Because when we're kind of digesting these types of stories, we're normally focused on the perpetrator. So we're kind of watching it like the same way Elizabeth is, like just trying to get all the dirt. But it's not so entertaining when you see the victim, right? So there is that uncomfortability because you don't know when to laugh in this film. You don't know how to move. And I think that's done very much intentionally to make the audience feel very uncomfortable about the way in which they kind of consume this type of material. So you guys let me know what you think, and until next time.